morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is January 8th, 2024. I'm coming at you with an early morning update. This will likely release sometime in the early to middle parts of the afternoon. It is about 5 o'clock in the morning, but there is a lot of serious weather activity that I want to cover for you guys, and it's time we actually put out a hard segment to the YouTube channel. And I just want to let you know in advance, this is going to be very, very raw, unedited. We're not going to do a whole lot of cutting, splicing, special effects. No text on the screen. We're just going to lay it out to you as clean and as crystal clear as possible, okay? Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. Please like and share this video. Try to get this word out. We have a very dangerous setup ahead of us, not only to include our blizzard and major winter storm conditions that a lot of us have been talking about for the Midwest, the Great Lakes up in the Northeast, but we have a very, very life-threatening setup in terms of our tornado, damaging wind potential, and maybe even some embedded pockets of larger hail across the Gulf coastline through central and northern Florida and then up into the Carolinas as of this morning. Starting off on our infrared satellite imagery, you can see this system right in through here, this very, very aggressive trough digging in past the U.S.-Mexico border with a low already spinning up over the Four Corners area. This is our main event. This is what I'm nicknaming the Big Tamale as it begins to work its way into the southern and central plains, and we see even further surface-based cyclogenesis over the Oklahoma and Texas panhandle. We are expecting to develop a very good definitive line of very sharp thunderstorm activity right along the leading edge of this polar push of air. I've been hearing a lot of folks mentioning Arctic this, Arctic that. This is not Arctic air, folks. I can show you the jet stream. I can show you the thickness lines associated with this, our rules of thumb for identifying where our major delineations in air mass are, and I can tell you right out of the gate without having to look into that. And I can tell you right out of the gate, without having to look too heavily into that, this is just a simply more natural, bona fide, and genuine push of polar air from the Canadian provinces. The Arctic air is still just barely to the north of the U.S.-Canadian border. You can kind of see it on this satellite image, as a matter of fact, where you see those blue shades closer to ground level. That's how cold it is up there. We're not seeing that transition down to the south. We're not seeing those sub-zero temperatures down at the surface level transition down through the United States, especially down as far as the desert southwest, the southern plains, the Gulf Coast, where this is likely to realize most of our significant severe weather activity, especially the tornado threat right along the Gulf Coast. So this is not an Arctic air mass just yet, but we are exploring the possibility with system number 3, technically system number 5 after this one, is when we're actually going to see those Arctic thickness lines, those Arctic temperatures, that Arctic air mass come out of Canada and move across the Central Plains, the Great Plains, the heart of the United States. So here we go. As a matter of fact, I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. This is our 0Z GFS. Here's our first major weather player. We're going to see quite a bit of snowfall, definitely blizzard conditions along the west and northern periphery of this system as that wraparound moisture all within the warm sector encounters that 540 thickness line, our rain snow line as we like to call it, and wraps around to the western side and the south side of this system. Lots of snowfall. We'll get into those totals in the middle in a moment here. But also we are watching very closely this significant severe weather event highlighted by Storm Prediction Center and other National Weather Service sources. We have a significant severe weather setup for some very majorly populated areas. There's going to likely be widespread power outages, damaging convective winds, and of course a potential for scattered tornadic activity, multiple funnel appendages associated with this area. We're also looking at the likelihood of seeing F0 to F1 tornadoes on the regular, with the chances of F2 or stronger growing as we speak, especially now that we are starting to notice that warm sector is slowly establishing itself over the Gulf of Mexico. We're starting to see that really good, robust, warm return flow, that stratiform shower activity over the Gulf pushing towards the Gulf of Mexico coastline that's going to help to not only impede a little bit of our surface-based convective potential energy, because we're going to have that cloud cover, the warm core, the warm rain that's going to be falling out of the shower activity, but this is also going to intensify how much mechanical lift and how much ML cape we see on the leading edge of that front, because we have such a dense area of upper-level vorticity, a dense area of shallow, cold air that's going to essentially shovel that warm air out of its way, bully it out of its way, and fire up those very aggressive thunderstorms. And the shear is off the charts, folks. Our SKU-T soundings are definitely forecasting between 70 to almost 100 knots of shear as you ascend the atmosphere in a clockwise fashion. So plenty of wind to get these storms spinning. We're going to need to watch this very closely. This is a whole different setup than what we've seen so far this El Nino winter season. As I continue through the loop, that first winter storm gets going. We can see this second one is expected to form up. Now, I do think we're still going to be recovering or letting the atmosphere reset over the southeast United States, so I don't anticipate we're going to have as widespread coverage of potential severe weather with this technically fourth but second system is what we'll call it in terms of these big waves moving through the pattern. We're still going to have some modified polar air settled in over the northeast alongside the mid-Atlantic coast down through the southeast as well, so we're not going to see the chances of getting a very established warm sector to flush all that out too quickly. It's this next system here coming in behind that, and I'll show you this on the Euro as well, that I do think may pack a bit more of a punch. It does seem like the low pressure wants to establish itself right over the Gulf Coast states, move a little bit further off to the east as opposed to these last two systems punching through the Midwest, the Great Lakes. We could once again see a return of a very organized squall feature, at least particularly for the Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida. So we're going to be watching this closely, and again, if you look at these thickness lines, here's your 510. Great rule of thumb is the 510 decameter thickness line is where you want to look for your Arctic band of air. The 540 line is our rain-snow line, and the 528 is usually arguably your best indicator as a rule of thumb where your true line of polar versus not so much polar air is found. And then, of course, the 570 line is going to be our delineation between subtropical and not so tropical air. Some will argue it's the 564 line, but if you remember those values, you won't go wrong in terms of determining your air mass type. Here's a look at our 0Z Euro, and as you can see, here's our first system, the Big Tamale, working its way through. Shortly thereafter, we get our secondary system, not looking as impressive. Very good warm sector. We could see a really nice freezing rain situation along the lee of the Appalachian Mountains, particularly in parts of North Carolina, Virginia, maybe a little bit further to the north where we did see some freezing rain activity with this last system, Winter Storm Ember. This does seem to take a very favorable track to encounter that cold air that's still going to be wrapped up along the lee of the Appalachians, sinking in from eastern Canada across the northeast and along the coastline there. And then this next system here, even the European model is thinking it could be a lot more robust, a lot more to the south, not as deep or amplified as a low pressure as our Big Tamale coming here within the next 24 to 36 hours, but because of where it's tracking, it's going to have support most definitely from our subtropical jet, our El Nino jet as well. Here's our 570 line cutting right across the Central Florida Peninsula. We have our 528 line back behind it, and then our 510 line is sinking in hot pursuit. In fact, it looks like our European model has backed off just a little bit in terms of our cold air advection. It looks like the 510 line wants to barely come into the upper Great Lakes, upper Midwest area where we could see a little bit of that Arctic plunge sneak its way down. But overall, guys, looking at this pattern, it does not seem like we're going to see that Arctic jet come down just yet. We could see a little bit of this activity occurring up over the northern plains with that secondary system wrapping up in there, but it doesn't seem like we're going to see Arctic-style weather for anywhere along the southern tier United States. All right, here we go. This has been causing a lot of hubbub on the interwebs. The YouTube sphere and social media has been ablaze with multiple feet of snow, this, and that. I'm here to tell you a lot of that is either misinterpretation on other folks' part, or it is, for all intents and purposes, hype. We could see overall accumulation exceed a foot to 2 feet in some localized areas, but again, if you track this situation through time and we have this multitude of winter storms marching through the pattern, you're going to see layer upon layer upon layer of snowfall coming into your area. So over time, will we see enough snowfall accumulate with each low pressure system moving through to drop that kind of snowfall? 100%, I'm on board with that, but we have to take into consideration that the snow rates and the precip rates with each individual storm are vastly different. It's going to be the accumulation over days upon days, over period upon period, as opposed to with each storm, you're going to see what some of these folks are predicting, 2 to 3 feet of snow, which with each low. No, that's not the case here. Starting off with our 0Z Euro, this is going to be your 24-hour snowfall, and I like looking at this because it gives you a great idea, on average, what our models are generally thinking in terms of how much snow we can get with each individual systems, and then towards the end, we'll look at the total accumulation over a set period of time, if that makes sense to you guys. So with this next Big Tamale system, it looks like we're going to see a very narrow corridor just to the left-hand side or to the west of where our deformation zone is going to be with this comma feature. You have the comma head, where your cyclonic circulation is most prevalent, and you have all that moisture wrapping around the center of circulation of that low. The deformation zone is going to be where your jet stream at 300 millibars is essentially moving over the center of circulation, supporting it, giving it life, the lifeline to these storms, and spreading out. On the left-hand side, to the north and west side of the storm is where most of your significant snowfall is going to fall. And the Euro does a great job of highlighting that corridor, and it looks like the general idea is through Nebraska, parts of Oklahoma and Kansas, especially the Oklahoma Panhandle particularly, moving up into the Midwest, we could see upwards of a foot of snowfall. Very narrow band, right along that most northwestern flank of that low center of circulation is where we could see enough accumulation to approach that foot, maybe 12 to 13 inch threshold before it works its way out pretty quickly. This is going to be supplemented by a very hefty wind chill and blizzard conditions. We are anticipating this low is going to deepen below 980 millibars. You will realize blizzard conditions within that heavy snow band because your visibility is going to drop. We're going to have winds between 30, maybe even 40 miles an hour in excess of that in some localized spots. You are going to see blizzard whiteout conditions, so please be prepared for this. Have a plan. Power outages are very likely. Icy roads, lots of good snow piling up against certain features depending on your wind direction and where those structures lie. You're going to see some snow drifts really begin to build in. So be cognizant, maintain your situational awareness. Don't go outside if you don't need to, just to avoid any dangerous setups. Same thing on the GFS. If we go back in time just a little bit, you can see the GFS is definitely on board with the European models thinking. In the 24-hour totals, we could see upwards of a foot, if not maybe just above that in very, very isolated instances. We're talking amongst a few counties in each individual state. You can see that corridor right in through here, moving off to the east or northeast towards the lower Great Lakes region. That is going to be just to the west of where the models are thinking this low is going to track. It's going to come up out of the southern plains and move right into the Midwest to the Great Lakes region and up into Canada before we finally lose the influence from this system. Here is our actual accumulation of snow depth. I don't see a lot of people reading this model to you guys out there, and this is also very important. This is how much actual sticking snow the models are thinking we could see piling up on the amounts that we just saw with Winter Storm Ember. And it's very interesting to see that in terms of the change, it looks like we can see on average between 3 to 6 with some isolated instances of 6 to 8 inches of total accumulation as we move through this next event. And then it goes through time. You can see we're expecting a little bit more snowfall with the next system. Eastern Canada and up near Michigan is likely to get it big. And then out west over the northwest quadrant of the U.S., the Pacific Northwest, Great Basin area of Idaho, parts of Montana into the northern Rockies could see some really good accumulation with the third system that's likely to come out. And we're just going to have to continue to watch this because now that we're getting past the 200-hour mark, we're not going to get too heavily wrapped up in the values. There's going to be some pretty substantial changes. Last but not least, blend of models is definitely thinking about the same. If you look at the shading, we're seeing that strong corridor of very heavy snowfall, 24-hour total snowfall here, guys. National Weather Service blend of models is not thinking we're going to hit that 12-inch, that foot parameter. Maybe very, very isolated instances right up into the Midwest as you get through parts of, I believe that's Wisconsin, or maybe that's Minnesota. Minnesota, Wisconsin, excuse me. I got to brush up on my Northeast geography. We'll get into that very soon, but you can definitely see very, very small pocket of 12-inch. So I think the general thinking with the National Weather Service blend of models is going to be on average between 4 to 6 inches of snow. Most of the outer lying areas further away from your center is going to have 1 to 3 inches at best, but those blizzard conditions and the potential freezing rain on the right-hand side of this storm is going to be what I think is more dangerous than the total accumulation of snowfall, truthfully. Flood conditions are definitely going to have to be examined along the eastern seaboard and across the Gulf Coast with that strong squall band coming through. It looks like our 24-hour precip indicated here by the Euro is going to exceed the 3 to 4 inch threshold, which is definitely going to induce some localized flooding, especially in your lower lying areas. In your local neighborhood, we could see some water collecting on roadways, on medians, trying to spill over onto sidewalks and to busy intersections. We definitely want to watch this closely, especially as you stay up onto the right in the eastern flank of this low pressure. That warm sector is going to keep the stratiform precip occurring for a much longer period of time, allowing those rain accumulation totals to rack up maybe about half an inch to an inch before that squall feature can come through, or the heavier thunderstorm activity along the cold frontal line will drop some heavier precip as it moves through. We're going to rapidly go through this. This is the EHI with the 3-kilometer name. We're going to blast through a lot of these dynamics, guys, just so we can get the timing on it. We're getting close to closing time, and I don't want to make this video too long in duration. As you can see, as we get into the afternoon hours, sunrise this morning and into the early afternoon hours of eastern Texas, particularly the Houston area, coastal Texas, moving towards Beaumont, getting towards that Louisiana state line, you are going to have very good helicity index values in that area to get a lot of these storms spinning. And what EHI basically is, guys, guys is a combination of how much spin these storms could have mixed in with what we're thinking our instability, our buoyancy could look like, put together in a wonderful color-coded chart for us to see. And anywhere you see these very vibrant colors, the key takeaway is you're going to have rotating storms, possible supercells, which come with tornadoes more than likely. So we're looking at a mid-afternoon, early afternoon start time as the sun comes up. This is 15 Zulu right here, so this is about 10 a.m. in the morning as we move through from here. 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're finally starting to see that threat begin to diminish for eastern Texas. This is 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, might be 6 p.m. out there in East Texas, moving into Louisiana. And Louisiana is going to be under enhanced risk, particularly near Lake Pontchartrain, New Orleans, the south and east quadrant of Louisiana, and into southern Mississippi is going to be under the gun for our enhanced scattered tornado coverage risk. Lots of damaging winds associated with this, and along the coastal areas particularly, you could see upwards of 60, 70 miles an hour with some of these convective bursts that come through. Can't rule out the possibility of seeing some very small single-trip hailstones with these very strong thunderstorms, very buoyant updrafts coming through your area. It will be a nocturnal threat for central, southern, and eastern Louisiana, and as we further transition off to the east. We'll switch over to my next panel so we can get a better look at the southeast. Excuse me, I think I have it here. Where are we? I have a ton of different panels pulled up. Here we go. All right. So it'll be a nocturnal event as you encounter this beast in Louisiana, parts of Mississippi, and then the south and central portions of Alabama just before sunrise. This is 5 a.m. in the morning, this is 6 a.m., and this is 7 a.m. We do believe our frontal boundary is going to be crossing the Alabama and Florida state line, moving into the Panhandle where Pensacola Beach is. That's where we're likely to see our supercellular tornadic activity, and we have very good tornado parameters coming together. So again, just to reiterate, early to mid-afternoon on today, Monday, between the hours of 10 to noon, lunch hour in Texas is when things are going to start firing up. And then from then on in, it's going to be an eastward path with this squall line. We can track it through time. It'll be very easy to follow. So we just got to keep an eye on radar, on satellite imagery, and determine where these systems are rotating best. And then it looks like we're going to have a surge of possible buoyancy and rotational potential for these storms along the east coast of Florida up into the Carolinas and parts of eastern Georgia thanks to the Gulf Stream waters. We're going to have that cold front moving over these colder waters, so as the leading edge encounters the warm Gulf Stream current, it is likely to help ramp up some of these convective indices, just like we saw 2 days ago in Fort Lauderdale. As that frontal band made it closer to the east coast of southeast Florida, we had a little bit of enhancement brought in by our Gulf Stream, ramped it up, dropped that tornado in the Fort Lauderdale area. I do think we're going to see a little bit more widespread tornadic coverage with this system as it moves through, just because of the warm sector, the warm conveyor established with this. So my folks in the Carolinas, we definitely need to be paying close attention to this, and I mean very close attention to this. It was a few live streams ago I'd mentioned we might still have some cold air dammed up against the lee of the Appalachians, but the models, the general thinking is this is going to be such a buoyant, such a dynamic system. We're going to flush a lot of that out and allow some of our surface to mid-level buoyancy, instability to work its way in there, and the Gulf Stream is going to provide a little bit of an additional nudge to really get those storms going. So supercell tornado parameters are going to extend into the eastern coastlines of the Carolinas, maybe getting into interior South Carolina, trying to dig into central North Carolina, but I do think that's when we're really going to see values diminish. It's more so going to be a South Carolina situation and an East Coast, maybe eastern periphery of North Carolina setup. We also need to be watching closely in Georgia where that squall line comes through. I know these EHI values seem to diminish, but as you can see, these are our SIG-TORM parameters with the HRRR starting off on the right-hand side. It looks like we're really going to see things fire off right at about 11. That's 11 a.m., 12 a.m., or excuse me, 12 p.m., 1 p.m., moving through eastern Texas. And then if you track it through and move over to the left-hand side of the chart, we're going to have that nocturnal threat after sundown moving into Louisiana. This is 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11, and then midnight. We're really going to have good tornadic parameters moving in to eastern Louisiana, coastal Mississippi, so Biloxi, Keesler Air Force Base out there. I have a few viewers tuning in from that general location as well. We need to watch this closely overnight for a nocturnal tornado threat. And this is 2, 3, 4, 5 a.m. in the morning. We're starting to cross that state line of Alabama to Florida, moving into the Panhandle, Pensacola area, Tyndall Air Force Base, Panama City, Apalachicola, getting close to Tallahassee as the sun has just started to shine. This is 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m., and you can see those tornado parameters getting back up into Georgia, into South Carolina, and then back into North Carolina Carolina as well, with seeing a lot of good enhancement right there from our Gulf Stream current as that front comes across. You see how that front, the leading edge of the cold air, encounters that warm layer underneath it? It's going to really help to ramp up our instability. Cold over warm is not good. We want to flip that kind of equation around to stabilize the atmosphere, and that's not going to be the case here. Simulated reflectivity for our south central plains. You can see that squall feature really getting going, and it looks like we could possibly see a thunderstorm threat into Oklahoma, Arkansas. I wouldn't rule out the possible threat of severe weather associated with this. Not necessarily tornadic, but more so damaging winds associated with the convective down rushes, the collapsing of these thunderstorms as they move across. Lots of good coastal inflow from our warm conveyor off the Gulf of Mexico into Louisiana, parts of Mississippi, into Alabama, Florida Panhandle. That's going to help to bring up the amount of moisture and how much potential flooding we get out of this system. It'll help to saturate our environment as well, so we're really going to have to watch closely exactly how this establishes itself. Again, conditionally unstable here. We're not absolutely unstable. We're not leaning towards that absolutely unstable threshold, so it is going to be conditionally dependent on how much buoyancy we do receive with that warm sector. We'll get a better handle on that once we see the surface low emerge over Texas and Oklahoma. This is going to be our 6Z HRRR tracking this puppy through as it moves across, and I'm going to use the exact same terminology. Right about here is where I'll stop the clock, 12Z on January 9th. This is 7 a.m. in the morning as the sun's coming up, and I'll go ahead and kind of draw you guys a hypothetical line of where I do believe all of my viewers watching this video right now need to be paying close attention, regardless of what any map or severe weather depiction says. Just looking at our base reflectivity here, our simulated radar, anybody to the south of where this line is drawn right there. So right about the Atlanta, Birmingham, same latitude as those general cities, Augusta, Columbia, South Carolina, Florence, getting into North Carolina, anywhere further to the south, just to avoid questioning localized areas. And it's not the matter of I won't answer you guys. I'll definitely make the time to answer every single one of you. I just kind of want to broad brush it. As this squall line comes through, anyone south of that pink metaphorical line that I have drawn, or my hypothetical line that I have drawn on the map here, that is where we are likely to have to do battle with some sort of severe weather, whether it be tornadic activity, very strong damaging winds in excess of 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, very light to occasional larger hailstones within a quarter of an inch up to a half inch. Some of the models do think we could see upwards of an inch sized hailstones right up along the Gulf coastline. The further north you go, that threat is rapidly going to diminish. But I think anywhere south of where you can see the most organized band of this squall convection is going to need to watch this very closely. Some discrete cells rotating up in on the leading edge of that just out ahead of the front. Those will most likely definitely be spinning. If you look off the coastline here just to the south of the panhandle of Florida, we have some discrete cells right upon the leading edge, not inside the squall line itself, but they have that teardrop, that bean shape associated with them. Anything that does try to form up prefrontal is going to be spinning, undoubtedly. I can put a lot of confidence and faith into that, so watch your radars closely, guys, if you have the capabilities of doing so. We're going to wrap up the video. Thank you very much for watching, folks. I really do appreciate all your continued coverage and your support. We're going to be going live through this event to keep you guys updated on this. We will be out chasing, still trying to nail down exactly where our target area is going to be. I'd like to head up to the Panhandle to catch this bad boy as it's coming through early in the morning, and then chase it back down into the Central Florida Peninsula just to show you guys exactly what's happening as it moves in. See if we do see some dissipation thanks to our colder waters along the western coastline of the Florida Peninsula. To be determined. We'll see. I'm going to spend a lot rest of the morning ironing that out. That's why I'm making this video as early as I am. And if there are any other significant updates in our model data between now and 12 Zulu, and even tonight before this kick starts for Alabama, Florida, and further to the east, I will let you know. So thank you very much for watching, guys. Be safe out there. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Until next time, this is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.